Mark Strassman is in Grand Isle, Louisiana tonight. And Mark, more oil is headed your way as well.
That's right, Katie. In fact, this island's about to get smacked by another wave of oil. I want you to take a look now. Local officials say they have never seen anything like it.
This is what's lurking off the coast of Grand Isle. Raw crude, miles of it. A slick more than twice as long as the 7-mile island.
Exactly 10 miles offshore, this boat is floating right in the middle of Grand Isle's latest and so far biggest threat in this disaster. All this oil, this is so heavy I can barely lift it, is part of a 16-mile slick that currents out here in the Gulf are now pushing to land. That's the oil slick right there.
Right.
Aubrey Chasson, Grand Isle's fire chief, has to coordinate the island's response.
Do you have enough resources to go after it?
No, sir.
You don't?
I don't think we do. No, I don't think we do.
So some of it's going to come ashore?
I believe that.
On the sea bottom, BP engineers hoping to cut and cap the gushing wellhead were held up by a snag. Their diamond-sided saw got caught in a tangle of broken pipeline, and more oil spit out of the new cut. But the engineers got past it.
It's not so matter whether it can be executed or not, it can be. It's a question of how much precision we can bring to it.
As early as tomorrow, BP hopes to cap the well with a containment valve and attach a new pipe to siphon oil to a surface ship. Not plug the leak, contain it. And for BP, pressure's mounting. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, Florida's bracing for its first major landfall of oil near Pensacola.
Our state resources have determined that the oil sheen, with it are thousands of tar balls. Skimmers have been deployed near Pensacola.
On barrier islands off Mississippi and Alabama, an oil cleanup's underway. The good news, since President Obama's visit to Grand Isle last Friday, local officials report better coordination with BP and federal agencies.
Kind of like a wife and a husband fighting. You don't get a divorce, you fix your problems. And that's what we've agreed to do.
Since the president's visit, the local fire chief says there are 3 times as many response workers on this island. He also says while local response leaders and national response leaders may have disagreements, at least now, once a decision is made, everybody's marching in the same direction. Katie?
And Mark, you know, this is the 44th day of the spill, and you've been covering it for well over a month. Clearly, today was the worst you've seen.
No question, Katie. Seen a lot of oil on land and in the water. Nothing like this, though. This was a solid sheet of oil, the consistency of cake mix. It was a couple of 100 yards wide, like a couple of football fields. There wasn't a response boat in sight. But the overwhelming impression was the smell. I mean, I have a fairly strong stomach, felt queasy for 45 minutes after we left the water. I think, Katie, that some of the response workers are going to have a very hard time out there.
Sickening and heartbreaking. Mark Strassman begins our coverage tonight in Grand Isle, Louisiana. Mark, it keeps getting worse down there.
It sure does, Katie. More waves of oil, in fact, rolled in here today. They keep rolling in, and every day here, the impact on life becomes more clear, human life and wildlife. Today's new images are troubling, and remember, this is a crisis with no end in sight.
At the water's edge, a dazed brown pelican, Louisiana's state bird, dripped with oil. A few feet away, this green herring was dying, suffocating in oil. And on East Grande Terre, a barrier island, Governor Bobby Jindal was furious. In these birds' struggle, he saw coastal Louisiana's new reality.
Looks pretty helpless.
Well, you know, this is not only heartbreaking, but it ticks us off. You see, again, you see these birds trapped in the soil. This shows you what's at risk along our coast.
When you get a sense of the thickness of this crude, you also start to understand something else. Why this pelican never stood a chance, and why so many other birds are now at risk as this oil keeps coming ashore.
Waves of spilled crude have smeared more than 140 miles of Louisiana coastline. On the seabed floor, BP's giant shears sliced the broken pipeline from the gushing well. But the cut was jagged, yet another disappointment.
We're going to have to see as we put the containment cap on exactly how effective it is.
The containment cap is BP's next step. Put it over the gushing wellhead, then siphon oil to a surface ship. The risk? Cutting the pipe could release another 100,000 gallons a day.
The Gulf spill is a tragedy that never should have happened.
To fight the spreading stain on the BP brand, the company has begun a national PR campaign.
BP will be here for a very long time. We recognize that this is just the beginning.
But many Louisianans are incensed at BP, especially a recent comment by its CEO.
You know, I'd like my life back.
Hayward apologized, but Jindal is not over it.
You know, he wants to get back to his way of life. I'm pretty sure that brown pelican wants to get back to her way of life.
The more Governor Jindal looked at those oily birds and talked about those oily birds, the more angry he became. New images he'll have in mind tomorrow when he escorts President Obama around this island. Katie?
And Mark, what is happening to those birds? Can they be saved?
The hope is they can be, Katie. The governor's people called state wildlife officials that came by boat. They ended up removing 15 pelicans and 4 seagulls. No word yet on how many of those birds will survive, but I'll tell you, Katie, the birds that we all saw in that video were in very, very rough shape.
Mark. We begin tonight with Mark Strassman in Grand Isle, Louisiana. Mark, the oil flow may be decreasing, but anger there is on the rise.
Clearly on the rise, Katie, because this disaster will go on for months. And the guy who owns this shrimp boat, for instance, knows that it's going to stay docked indefinitely. And to truly get a sense, to truly understand the disaster's impact, as BP is learning, you have to come here and get your shoes dirty.
Yeah, this oil is awful.
Incredibly, Bob Dudley had never been this close to Louisiana's oily disaster.
It's tragic, and it's very apparent that it's very tragic.
Incredible because Dudley is BP's point man in this cleanup, now in its 7th week. And finally today, he saw Barrier Island where just this weekend, these pelicans sat drenched in BP oil.
Is it what you expected?
There's nothing like seeing something and feeling it, smelling it, and talking about it.
On your hands?
On my hands. Yes, it is. It's emotional. I have a very emotional reaction to it.
As long as there's water, the oil keeps traveling. BP spill has now reached the northern edge of Barataria Bay. That's behind Grand Isle. It's under siege, an island completely surrounded by oil.
A mile under the Gulf, BP's containment cap is trapping more oil every day from the broken wellhead. 3 of its 4 vents are open to avoid another buildup of icy hydrates that clogged past fixes. At last count, this containment cap siphoned 462,000 gallons a day to a surface ship, maybe half the daily spill. But more escaping oil still smothering wetlands and wildlife. And this crisis will drag on for months.
This will be well into the fall. This is a siege across the entire Gulf.
Oh, there's anger.
Patrick Shea is so angry, he built a symbolic cemetery in his Grand Isle front yard. Each cross represents something lost in BP's spill: shrimp, fishing, the beach.
We have to fight back, kick, scream, whatever we got to do.
On this oily shoreline, BP's Bob Dudley got an up-close sense of why so many people are furious with his company.
It is very tragic. I'd like to get more people out here to see it.
So many Gulf residents are fed up with the red tape and delays. BP has finally agreed to pay for some barges to come here and block oil from entering 2 waterways, but local leaders first had to threaten BP that those barges were going in with BP's consent or without it. Katie?
And Mark, as I mentioned, we asked our viewers to submit questions about the spill, and let me ask a few to you. G. Packwood asks, how much oil is actually in this field of oil? While Illinois Pam wants to know, will this well run dry?
Well, every well runs dry eventually, Katie, but no one who knows exactly how much oil is in this one is actually saying. The BP will say it's a discovery well, but won't give a number. Federal regulators know the number, but say it's proprietary and secret. And oil and gas experts we have talked to have said that typically a well this size, a company will spend $100 million developing it, so the amount of oil in there must be huge, but how huge is a big secret.
And still more oil is being burned at sea, 60 miles off the Louisiana coast. Mark Strassman got an exclusive look at the operation, which generates a lot of heat and a lot of smoke. He's back on land in Grand Isle tonight. Mark, I guess the feeling is smoke on the water is better than oil on the shore.
Smoke in the water is good news, Katie, because people here in the oil's bullseye need a lot more protection than just the boom behind me. So out in the Gulf, smoke is a signal that less oil is coming ashore.
fire on the water. It's oil burning in towering columns of smoke and flame. We went 60 miles into the Gulf for an exclusive look at one of BP's frontline defenses against floating oil reaching shore.
As far as the front line goes, you can't get more front than this.
This is, by far, the biggest control burn in history. Sometimes multiple fires burn at once. We got within 150 feet of this one. A roaring tornado of flames swirled inside. Up close, there's a sound this burning oil makes. A crackling, bubbling noise like a fryer-later, along with a whooshing noise from the flame tornadoes inside the bigger fire. I can feel the heat. Flame temperatures can reach 2,000 degrees. That's enough to melt steel. And with so much oil in these waters, some of these fires burn for more than 6 hours. Here's how this operation works. From this plane, spotters like Al Allen look for long streamers of heavy crude and direct shrimp boats with fire-resistant boom down below into position.
We talk to the pilot and we talk to the captains on the boat and we vector them into the oil.
The shrimpers and their boom corral the oil, what they call the pudding, and then wait for the igniter boat.
This is what we use to ignite the fire.
Anthony Verdon lights the flare that melts this jug, filled with kerosene and accelerant gel. It ignites the oil, and within minutes, a small fire can become a massive one. Big fires burn off 2,000 gallons a minute.
Sometimes they get bigger, sometimes they get smaller. It's never the same fire.
But when you have a big one like this one,
it's impressive.
so far, these fires have burned more than 4.5 million gallons of oil. That's only a fraction, maybe 3 days worth, of BP's overall leak. But every gallon burned is one less gallon making landfall on someone's coastline. Coordinators of those control burns say that breathing that smoke is a lot less harmful than, say, smoking cigarettes. But it is a nuisance. So all those burns happen at least 3 miles offshore in the Gulf, like having a giant fire in an even bigger bathtub. Katie?